Hello, my loves. It's Lauren, and this is the Soul Indulgence Show. So, I want to talk to you today about the science of pleasure. And I want to start with a story. Now, I don't know if you've been following my personal Facebook page today, but I've been talking about fun facts. And I think, facts are just delightful. And when we find these new little nuances, we can all have a chuckle or an aha. And I shared something on my page that I realized reading a book that has just blown my mind open. And so it's this fact that until the 5th century, there were actually two schools of thought in the Christian faith. One of them was that God became man so that we could become God. This idea that our whole purpose on life was to access God in us, like access our ability to be divine, right? That the divine was actually alive in us. And many theorize that this is actually the predominant school of thought that came from Jesus's actual teaching. But then 5 centuries after that, this other school of thought came in and took over, that we were all sinners and that we needed to go to church to atone for our sins and seek salvation for our, terrible sinner souls. Now, I share this with you whether or not you ascribe to the Christian faith. I think it's really important to understand that we live in a society that is based on Judeo-Christian values that come from these very early teachings. And here we are, so many centuries in the future, but these are still the foundational principles that our lives have been built on. Now, when I was young, I did go to church, and I went to the Christian church, and there was this message that I always heard in church, and it's about sex. And I want to start talking about sex because we're talking about pleasure today, but that's not really what I ultimately want to talk about, but this is our entry point. So when I was going to church, I would hear these lessons about sex, that sex was wrong, especially sex before marriage was wrong. It was bad to enjoy sex. And I was very curious. I was very curious because I knew that our bodies were built the way that they were, where we were able to experience pleasure through sex. And yet I was getting this message that sex before marriage was wrong. I also got this message that you're supposed to enjoy sex when it's with your husband, right? Once you get married, then it's okay to enjoy sex, and actually you maybe should, even if the subvert message there was you should for your husband's satisfaction, not necessarily for your own. But these were in dissonance for me. I couldn't understand why I was supposed to not appreciate sex, and then boom, I get married, and then I would appreciate sex. Hey, Angela, I'm so glad you're on here. And yes, it does have to be talked about. Thank you for sharing that. So this idea that we're getting these very concrete messages, right? That we are not enough as we are. And this comes from, Judeo-Christian stuff, and then it comes from even this more nuanced sex belief, right? Around that it's bad to appreciate pleasure just for our own sakes. And so I want to hold that piece aside. And now I want to talk about just this phenomenon in our world where women aren't having fun. Where I know so many women who just toil away. We work so hard to keep everything together. We are taking care of our families. We are taking care of whether that's our parents or our children or our partners, our pets, our jobs. We're taking care of all of the logistics, right? Like the mental load of all of the things that we're holding. And we aren't giving ourselves permission, because we haven't been taught to actually relax and to actually enjoy, and I think I mentioned this in one of my lives before, and I talked about, with Thanksgiving coming up, I always remember the holidays and seeing the women were in the kitchen working and the men were watching football. They're relaxing and having fun, and I'm supposed to go work? Really? That doesn't seem fair, and why would I want to do that? And so I think that there's, we have these really strong foundational messages that we've received. And then we see also just like in actuality how our world is constructed and how women, habitually take on these kinds of roles of task manager, managing all these things, and it's never ending work, and we have these messages that we can't relax until we get all the things done, and the things are never done, therefore we never get to have any fun. And I just want to say, like, stop. No, like, I'm not living in that life anymore. I'm not gonna do that. So now I want to come back to fun facts. And back into this biology piece, right? So I learned a fun fact recently, and it's also blowing my mind a little bit, maybe not as like revolutionary, but it's about marsupials. So marsupials have 3 vaginas. Did you know that? I did not. And they actually have kind of like 2 innies and 1 outie. So they have the male penis for a marsupial is actually pronged like a snake tongue, forked like that, and it can, penetrate 2 vaginas at the same time to potentially impregnate, 2 little uteruses, 2 little babies. And the 3rd vagina is actually in the pouch, which is where the baby would come out. And now kangaroo babies are, when they're born, they're the size of a jelly bean, and they come into the pouch, and then that's where they grow. This is cool for marsupials because they can be growing 1 baby while they've got 1 on the back burner. But for us, it matters too, right? Like, what a nuanced, crazy way that bodies work, because they've been honed over evolution, over eons, right? Like, I'm talking about things in the 5th century, we're talking 100 times that, right? 1,000 times that. I'm not actually even sure. It's so many years ago that our bodies have been forged, right, in the furnace of time to be the way that they are. And your body is wired for pleasure. Now, that is true when we're talking about orgasm, right? It is absolutely true that all female-bodied mammals have a clitoris. Its sole purpose is for pleasure, right? So why would we evolve this way? Well, pleasure is a really power motivator. So when we think about the need of our species to reproduce, having it be enjoyable is actually the most motivating than some concept of we must pass our seed on, right? It's actually well, we just want to do this now because it's fun. And that's why our species exists, and that's why all these other species exist, right? And have continued to exist, because there's pleasure. But we get to experience pleasure not just during sex, we get to experience pleasure in life. And another way that we are wired to experience pleasure is through our soul. We experience pleasure when we find the things that our soul is calling us to do. Our soul speaks to us. It speaks to us with longing, right? Which is, we can talk about longing in the sexual sense, and we can talk about longing in the soul sense. It's a yearning. It's a desire, right? Our soul is always guiding us. Now, what I see happen a lot is that we're not getting those really deep needs met. We are not living a life that just our life brings us pleasure, our relationships and our work and our, and I said I wasn't going to call it work anymore, but here I am, our purpose, right? We're not experiencing our life that brings us that kind of pleasure. And we know that we deserve pleasure, but we don't really know how to access that. It's kind of off limits. So we're well, I deserve chocolate cake, right? Or I deserve ice cream, or I deserve, to online shop and buy this thing, or I deserve to, give in and Facebook stalk my ex, whatever that really short-term thing is, we're trying to get at the big stuff, but when we get to that big stuff, when we can access that living in that way, where we are so fulfilled that we're at peace, and we're just get to feel purposeful, and we get to have pleasure in our every day, every moment has a capacity for that, then we don't need those other things so much. so many women come to me, right? And they want to like stop these little habits, and they've identified them as bad habits, and they know that that's not working for them. But they have tried like everything under the sun, and they haven't been able to get to what really does work, because what really does work is just, it's a different way of living. And it gets to be easy. Like once you can make that shift, it gets to be easy. You don't have to work so hard. It's not like, oh my God, I'm going to go on this diet and I'm going to do, the Stairmaster every day. Like, no, like when you live from here and you get to just make the choices that are in your best interest, because that's what feels good to you in the moment, and it's what connects you to your higher self, your future self, through this like really adaptive system in your body, right? It connects you to that. When we don't do that, and we actually turn away from our biology, that's a way that we disconnect from our bodies, right? We disconnect from our pleasure center, whether we're talking about the soul or whether we're talking about our clitoris, right? When we disconnect from our ability to experience pleasure, we're depriving our ecosystem of us. Like this whole thing we're in, we are interdependent, right? You are meant to live a life that lights you up, and so your whole radiance can shine. When you don't have that, not only do you not have it, but then all of your community, all of the people around you are deprived of getting to see you in your fullest. No, it's only through soul indulgence that we reconnect with our pleasure. Right? This whole society that we're in, this soul indulgent society, the purpose of this is so that we can access this next level of living, right? Where it doesn't have to be so freaking hard and so much work anymore. It can just be meaningful and fulfilling. And sure, there will be challenges in life, things that we can't control. But when we live from here, when we live the life that we know we're called to live, when we are in alignment and we are authentically showing up as ourselves, it gets to be easier. This is how we get to express our full radiance. This is how we shine, right? This is your light. This is your life. This is your chance to be a leader, even if it's just through accessing that part of you. Even if the way that you lead is just being honest about what your soul is calling you to do and then following it, right? Like it gets to be that easy. And I want it to be easy for you, because I don't want women to hold so much pain and so much effort and so much hardship anymore. I want to help all of us step into this new way, right? This new way where we're like, of course we're soul indulging ourselves, right? Like, why would we not? Like, why would we not? Why would we deprive the world of us being our most radiant? So thank you for joining me today. I love you. Take care of yourself, honor yourself, and have some fun for me, okay? Bye now.